একদম স্টার্ট করে আপনি ভেতরে চলে যান।
ওকে। হচ্ছে না তো?
আপনি ফোনটা হাতে নিয়ে এখানে আসুন, ফোনটা হাতে নিয়ে আসুন। Very good morning to all of you who are attending this session. So today's topic is the topic for today's session is that why is boredom a necessary evil, and we are going to basically discuss whether something like boredom can also have its virtues. That is what is going to be discussed today. So see, this is a very important topic because it, particularly for students, it is a very important topic because boredom is something which can it doesn't come with any announcement. Okay, it doesn't come with any notice. Boredom is something which just creeps in, and quite often we are ourselves surprised that in the middle of a very hectic schedule, how come there are passages of time in which you are completely bored, right? And there is another issue that boredom often leads to channeling your time and energy into activities which are not very productive. So you see, everything is necessary, just like studies is necessary, sports, extracurriculars is also very important. So in today's times, it is virtually impossible to rule out people dabbling with social media and giving a lot of screen time, which ultimately is not very productive. So this is something which is a part and parcel of our daily lives. And to be honest, probably it affects people who are not students as well. But primarily, my aim is to make these sessions for students. So I'll be talking in a manner which is specific to students. So this is a issue that nobody wants to get bored. Okay, nobody plans to get bored. Nobody makes a timetable where they incorporate boredom. But boredom just creeps into your time and space in some form or the other. And then what do you do about it? Now there is some kind of evidence based on analysis, based on research. There is some evidence that boredom is a state where you are not necessarily running out of energy. You are not necessarily feeling very low about whatever work you are doing. On the other hand, it could be that you are in a state of high energy. It could be that you are suitably, uh, your disposition is pretty much suited to the task at hand. And yet, for some unknown reason, you may just feel bored. It is generally boredom is associated with monotony, right? Uh, when people use the word boredom, it's generally associated with monotony. So if you do something which appears to be monotonous to you, most likely you will experience boredom. And if you, on the other hand, do something which is very exciting, or you perceive that as very challenging, then it is not very likely that you will experience boredom. So there might be a situation where, let us say, you are trying something very challenging, like for example, you are trying a problem in mathematics which is very difficult, which is very challenging, and you are suitably positioned to try that sum. You have tried different questions of that chapter up to that point. You have seen the solved examples of the chapter, and you are absolutely correctly positioned to try that sum. And you are going on trying it, right? And as you try that sum, you have kind of saturated yourself with your efforts. You are not able to move ahead. You find that you have sort of reached a dead end, and no matter how hard you try, you don't seem to be anywhere close to the solution of the problem. Now, there's a very interesting story about Archimedes, which everybody knows, and you know the story that Archimedes was assigned the task of judging the purity of gold in the king's crown. This is a very famous story, and I think those who are not students of science, they have also heard this story, right? So basically, there was this incident when Archimedes was in his bathtub, and he accidentally, while he was in his bathtub, he suddenly found the solution to the problem. So this is a very famous story, and I don't want to repeat the entire story now. But when he was in his bathtub, he discovered how he could judge the purity of the gold in the king's crown, and then of course that paved the way to the Archimedes principle and the law of flotation, which is a pretty well-known law done in class 9, right, in physics. So you know what happened after that. So what happened after that was that Archimedes said Eureka, Eureka. He exclaimed Eureka, and that has now become very famous. That is called the Eureka moment. So, what Archimedes achieved when he was in his bathtub, we call that an insight, right? That is called an insight. So, an insight will come from the most unexpected situations. Archimedes was probably not even thinking about the king's crown. He was not thinking about Archimedes' principle or the law of flotation. But while he was in his bathtub, it came to him. So, this is something very interesting, that in a bathtub you are having a bath. It is not really, it is a pretty mundane activity. It is a pretty, well, I wouldn't say monotonous, but it's a very mundane and routine activity which we do need to do every day to keep, to take care of our hygiene. But what is interesting is that during that state, the knowledge of the law of flotation, the knowledge of Archimedes' principle, it came to his mind. Now, this is what I am trying to say to all of you today, that there is scientific evidence that if you allow your mind to go in a drift, right? Allow your mind to go in a drift. Some of you may ask me that does that mean daydreaming? See, it could be daydreaming also. It could be daydreaming also, but your mind has to go in a drift. Like you are not consciously thinking about a particular problem, or you're not sitting down in an organized way, in a structured way, trying to solve a question or a problem, but rather, on the other hand, you are doing something which is very mundane and very routine, and there is nothing very exciting or challenging about it. And suddenly, in that state, you have that eureka moment, right? You have that insight. So there is scientific basis for this, and the people uh, who have done research on the neural systems of the human body, they have discovered that it actually happens like this. It happens for everybody. The insight which I was telling you about, the eureka phenomenon, getting an insight into a problem, this is applicable for all human beings. Probably Archimedes has made this famous because of the way it happened. He was having a bath and then he came out of the bath and went about saying Eureka. So he has made it famous because of the incident that happened, but it can happen to everybody. So this is something very interesting, that during any time of the day when you are seemingly not short of energy, and you seem to be up and about your daily affairs, and you seem to have the correct amount of energy, and you seem to be positioned appropriately, like for example, all your tools are ready, your books are ready, and you are supposed to now get down to your work, and then all of a sudden you get this feeling of boredom. So when that happens, what do you do after that? So that is something which we need to talk about. So when you experience boredom, at that time you will probably not be in a position to consciously put your mind into something very exciting or challenging, because that state of boredom has now crept into you. So if you at that time do something which is mundane or monotonous, it could be anything. Like for example, you are a student and you have your study table in front of you. So you're just not able to figure out what to do. So that is a state of boredom, right? And you're probably just looking out of the window, staring into emptiness, right? That is typical of boredom. You're just looking outside your window, looking at the people passing on the road, or you're looking at the sky. It's probably going to rain. So that is very typical of boredom. So at that time, you instead of continuously being in that state, you would like to do something about it. So you may do something very mundane and monotonous, like you may say that I'll organize my study table. So my study table is in a mess, so let me organize my study table. Or you have a bookshelf where you keep your books, let me organize my bookshelf. Or let me look at my schedule for the latter half of the day, let me look at my schedule for tomorrow. So you may want to indulge in some seemingly monotonous and mundane activities, but it is better you do it. It is better you do it. You may not want to do any of these things. You may say that I have sat down to study and I don't know why this boredom thing has crept into my system. So I'm just looking out at the road and the street and I'm looking at people passing by. And I don't seem to be doing anything at all. And I'm not really talking to anyone. People of the family are busy in their own work. So I'm totally to myself and I just don't know what to do now, but I would ideally like to study. So if that is the state in which you are, you may even consider doing something repetitive, like you are probably very good at some part of some subject, or there is some exercise or some kind of activity related to studies which you have done in the past and you are pretty good at it. There's no need to do it again, but you may want to just do it again. Like I said, boredom has crept into you, so you are not able to figure out what to do. So your mind is going into a state of drift, and so that state of drift, if it comes to you, the first thing you have to understand, it is very natural. It is very normal. It is not that you have inflicted it upon yourself, and it is not that you are an exception. Like somebody else in your place would be highly focused and would be able to study for long hours without ever going through this. So you don't have to feel like that. Okay, there is nothing untoward about it. It is something very natural. So you can, like I said, indulge in some activity which will take your mind away from what you are planning to do. So, like I said, you may want to organize your study table, you may want to organize your bookshelf, okay? Anything like there's a pile of newspapers and you would like to organize that. I'm just giving some random examples. Or you may just say that let me open some text or some exercise or some bunch of problems which I have already done recently. I am pretty good at it. I don't think I need to do it again. But then, the state of boredom has crept in, so I do need to do it. So that will, at least, even if it is monotonous, right? Um, Even if it is mundane, at least it will fill the time, and at least my mind will go into a state of drift rather than be completely blank, right? You will be surprised if your mind is completely blank. According to scientific evidence, even that is not a bad thing. Let us say you don't do any of these things at all. You don't arrange your study table, you don't arrange your bookshelf, you don't get up to organize the pile of newspapers which is lying in the next room. You don't open a chapter or an exercise which you have done in the recent past. You don't do any of those things, and you just sit over there and you're just waiting for some thought to come to your mind about what you should do. So even that, there is scientific evidence that even that is not bad, right? Because this is very natural. Okay, it has come to you because inadvertently, at the time when you were suitably energized, when you were suitably prepared, you didn't plan any activity, or whatever activity you planned, it's not coming to you naturally, and it's almost like you want it to come to you but it's not. So you're trying to fill in the time, and even just sitting there quietly, which is the most mundane thing you can do, even that is not bad. Now, at that point of time, if you try to crowd your mind with some very passive stuff like gaming or social media or watching television or whatever, watching something on your mobile. So, if you try to crowd your mind with that, then what happens? You are not allowing your mind to go into a state of drift, right? And then the problem happens that you then reach a state where there is absolutely no way you can come back to your studies. So you are not allowed your mind to wander into a state of drift. You will be surprised that there might be a very tough sum which you were trying the previous day, and in that state of mind, when you're trying, when you're not actually thinking about the sum, okay, when you are going through that boredom phase, suddenly that eureka moment may come to you, that insight may come to you. You are just staring out of the window, you have not understood what to do, and you're just staring into emptiness, and you are continuously going on staring. And so that is the most mundane thing you can do, the most monotonous thing you can do. But you will find that insight may come to you. So something related to what you have done very recently, which was bugging you, it may come to you as an insight. But at that point of time, suppose if you decide to completely disengage yourself, get up from your table and go to some other part of the house, or sit on your sofa and open social media or do some kind of gaming and things like that, then what you are doing is that instead of allowing your mind to go in a drift, you are actually crowding your mind with a lot of information which it is taking in passively, right? It is not actually engaging your mind. It is your mind is just passively taking all that information. But the problem is not that. The problem is that you have crowded your mind with those kind of activities. And now that state of drift has completely gone. That mundaneness has gone. That monotony has gone. So as a result, you are no better placed to handle what you left at your study table after you do all those activities. So you finish your gaming or your social media, and then you are not in any perfect position or better position than you were earlier to go back to your study table. And probably you may not be able to go back to your study table at all, right? You may then say to yourself that, okay, I have disengaged myself from my study table. Now I am in this other state where I am doing something which is seemingly very engaging me, and I am putting my mind into it. I'm doing some kind of gaming, or I'm making some posts on social media, so I am actually engaging my mind. But the truth is, it has taken you completely away from your study table. And then what happens is that you then go into a totally different state where you complete what you're doing, and then you look forward to something else. So your mind has completely gone away. So it's something like, if Archimedes, in his time, if he had social media, or if he had some kind of gaming, and instead of sitting in his bathtub, which is a very mundane and monotonous thing, instead of that, if he was into social media or gaming, then he may not have got the. Okay, this is a very weird example, but I'm just trying to tell all of you that the eureka moment may not have come to him at all. That insight may not have come to him at all. So, and like I said, because your mind has suddenly become crowded with all that clutter of information, so it will completely go away from your studies, and it will go into a different state altogether. So you might even call up your friend and suddenly say that, okay, shall we meet today? So that wasn't a part of the plan at all, right? You hadn't really planned to call up your friend and meet your friend. You somehow feel the need to connect and get over this issue of boredom. You need to connect with somebody or something to get over the problem of boredom. So passively, you are doing things like gaming or social media, so that has engaged your mind in a very passive way. And when that is done, you will feel that maybe if I call my friend and talk to him about studies, or her about studies, so maybe that will sort of resolve my situation, resolve my boredom situation. Whereas it's not going to resolve your boredom situation. Probably if you speak to somebody at the time when you're feeling bored, if you talk to somebody, if you read something, if you read a book, if you read a newspaper, whatever, probably you might say that it will take you away from the state of boredom. But talking to people, okay, engaging in conversation, social interaction, and reading something is not considered a passive uh, usage of your resources. So screen time of a certain kind is considered passive usage of your resources. So it may not be a bad idea when you are going through the phase of boredom. It may not be a bad idea that if you want to read something like a book or the newspaper, it may not be a bad idea to do that. Okay, and even talking to somebody may not be such a bad thing to do. But what you have to remember is that surprisingly, these are not going to solve your problem. The problem will be solved only if you allow yourself to go through the monotony, if you allow yourself to go through the mundaneness of boredom, then only your situation will be solved. It is true, right? And you may even go to another extreme. You may say that since I am completely bored, why don't I just go to sleep, right? So but that will also be something that might be a very unnatural response, but you may want to do that. So the point is that if you are genuinely feeling that you should go to sleep, and you feel that if I go to sleep right now, then probably I don't have to think too much about what to do. So when I get up from sleep, I'll make a fresh start. Suppose if you are thinking like that, well, that again is not a bad idea, because if you go to sleep, then what happens is that you get up from sleep and then you start, then of course you make a completely fresh start. So sleep is one thing which completely rejuvenates. So the moment you get up from sleep, whatever you were doing just before the sleep is now a thing of the past. So it completely rejuvenates, and then you are back to a new situation, okay, and new circumstances which you have to deal with. My point is that doing things which are not passive, like gaming and social media, doing things like talking to somebody, doing things like reading a book, reading the newspaper, even going to sleep, okay, these are a better option, okay, these are a better option than screen time of a certain kind, no doubt about that. These are definitely a better option. But my the essence of my conversation today with all of you is that do not hesitate to go through the mundaneness and the monotony. That is what I'm trying to say to you. Like, I am trying to say to you that when you experience that phase, then don't be reluctant to go through it. You may not be so tired that you want to go to sleep. Your body may not be wanting sleep, right? You may just maybe out of laziness, you may just hit the sack, you may just go to sleep, but your body may not be craving sleep. You probably did not want to step out of your study table and go and talk to somebody like your family member. You actually didn't want to do that. You were not thinking about it. And if you suddenly open the newspaper or some book, you were not actually wanting to open the newspaper or read the book. That wasn't on your mind. So you had sat down on your study table with the sole intent of doing your studies. So you didn't plan to sleep, or you didn't plan to go and talk to somebody or read the newspaper or read a storybook. That was not what you had planned to do. So you may do it, okay, and that wouldn't be such a bad thing, but that was not what you were planning to do, right? And certainly stepping away from your study table and indulging yourself in screen time is not a very good option at all, because that will completely take you away from that state. You will not be able to come back to that state in the same kind of disposition that you were. So the essence of what I'm trying to say to all of you, that it seems that when you are going through that period of boredom, what I would recommend is, number one, you simply allow yourself to go in a drift. If you think that you have started daydreaming, I say there's nothing wrong. A period of time will be there when you might be daydreaming, you might be just staring into emptiness, or you might actually dream about something with your eyes wide open. If you allow yourself to go through that, right? So there is like the proverbial pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So there is something good waiting to happen at the end of it. So there's no need to feel bad about it. There's no need to feel upset about it, that why am I having this boredom right now. On the other hand, you may want to indulge yourself in some mundane or monotonous activities like organizing your study table, like organizing your bookshelf, whatever, and you might even consider opening a chapter or an exercise which you have done in the recent past and which will help you to sort of get it back to your mind. Even that is a kind of monotonous thing because you have already done that exercise, you have already finished it, you have done every single sum of that exercise. So there's no need for you to do the monotonous thing of opening that exercise and doing it again. But you may consider doing it. Even that wouldn't be a bad thing to do. So these kind of activities like doing some household chores or opening a chapter or an exercise which you're pretty good at but still you're doing it, these kind of activities, they are also monotonous and mundane, but these activities are considered good. They are considered good. They are considered the correct kind of activities when you're going through the passage of boredom, right? So staring into emptiness, maybe a bit of daydreaming, that is also considered good. There is nothing wrong about all this. The bad thing is if you completely leave it all and indulge in screen time, that is really bad. Okay, and of course, the other thing which I spoke about, that you will just get up to go and talk to somebody, or you will get up to read some storybook or some newspaper. It may actually distract you from the state in which you are, and it is not a bad thing at all. Okay, talking to anyone is never a bad thing, and reading the newspaper or a storybook is also not a bad thing, but it may distract you because the purpose of your sitting at the study table was not to do that. You sat down at the study table with the sole purpose of putting your mind into studies. You did not sit over there thinking that within a few minutes I'll get up and go and talk to somebody. You did not sit at your study table thinking that I'm sitting here, but you know what, I'll probably get up and read some newspaper or storybook because I don't know how long I can hold on to my study table. So that's not what you are thinking, right? You were completely fresh. Maybe you had a bath and you were feeling very nice about yourself, and you thought that actually I will sit down and study. So this is something which is very very important that I wanted to tell all of you, that a person like Archimedes, who was a renowned scientist of his time, or maybe he was a philosopher, like I don't know that much about the historical part of Archimedes, but yes, his achievements in science are very well known. So a person of his stature could not solve the problem when he was actually putting his mind into it, and when he was going through mundaneness and monotony, that is when the solution came to him. So it is a very classic example that as a student, you may go through a lot of situations where the solution to a problem is not coming to you. Let me just take one example. Suppose trigonometry, right? Trigonometry is a very important part of class 9, 10, 11, 12 maths. So I think everybody has done trigonometry. Those who did not take maths as a subject in class 11, 12, they have also done trigonometry because it was there in class 9, 10. So you are solving, there was a topic called trigonometric identities. So you have been solving trigonometric identities, and you found a problem which you couldn't solve, right? You couldn't solve it. So when you were consciously trying to solve it, it didn't happen. Like you couldn't solve it, and eventually a time came when your mind was getting saturated. You were not able to reach the conclusion to the problem, so you kind of gave it up, right? So when you gave it up, okay, you probably went to the next sum. You thought that I'll try it again, or I'll ask my teacher again, let me try the next sum. Or you felt that maybe I should just go through the examples once more, maybe I'll get some information from those examples. So you thought that, okay, let me flip the pages backwards and see the examples, maybe that will guide me how to do the sum. You went through the theory once again thinking that that will help you to solve the sum. So you tried a lot of these things, right? That is very good. That is very good. Because see, you are independent mindedly trying to figure out the solution to the problem. You haven't asked your friend, you haven't asked your teacher. You are telling yourself that let me try it on my own, which is very good, right? But the problem cannot be solved. It's not coming to you for some reason. And then what happens? You leave that and go to the next sum. You try the next sum, and maybe in a while you close the subject and open a different subject, and then you have some other activities of the day, and then you have your dinner, and then some more studies, you go to sleep, whatever. And then later on in the next day, in the following day, you go through this passage of time when you are doing something really monotonous, like even brushing our teeth is kind of monotonous, right? Because we just do it, we are so used to it that it is kind of monotonous and mundane. Or you are just brushing your teeth, or you are just walking up and down the staircase of your building, right? So you're walking up and down the stairs of the building is also kind of monotonous and mundane because you are familiar with the territory. So you're just walking up and down and doing nothing else. So at that moment, when you're engaging in that mundane activity, that monotonous activity, suddenly you may get that insight, right? So remember, this is very, very important. What Archimedes example teaches us is that if you want to get an insight, okay, then a passage of time where there is mundaneness, a passage of time when there is monotony, a passage of time when you are seemingly bored, right? It may actually give you that insight, right? And I want to categorically say this to all of you, that do not hesitate to go through that period of time when you are experiencing boredom or monotony or mundaneness. Do not hesitate to go through that period. In fact, it might just be the balm which your brain needs, because daydreaming, or excessive daydreaming is of course very weird, and I am not actually advocating daydreaming at all, but I am just trying to say that your brain doesn't want to overexert itself. It doesn't want to suddenly deviate from the task at hand. It doesn't, it doesn't want to take you away from that state, go and do some other activity. Maybe it's not a bad activity, but still the brain doesn't want that, right? Your brain wants to take the task at hand and carry on with it. But instead of instead of actually doing the task at hand, you are going through this phase of boredom when you are seemingly become immobile. You are not able to do the task at hand at all. So that state of inertia, okay, that state of boredom, if you are going through it, it does not mean that you need to take yourself away from that state. It does not mean that you need to take away yourself from the study table. It does not mean that at all, right? It just means that you're going through that phase and it will pass over. And if you allow yourself to go through that phase, there is probably a lot of good that may come out of it in terms of like I said, you may get an insight into a problem which you were contemplating earlier, or you may actually get some sort of a period where your brain has suddenly become very, very docile, and it has become very, very I would say passive, and it is not really absorbing any information. It is not processing anything consciously. Maybe your brain needs that. Maybe it needs to be in that state of tranquility. Maybe it needs to be in a state where information is not overcrowding your brain. And maybe in that state of tranquility, in that state of boredom, in that state of maybe even daydreaming, maybe you may get the correct kind of thoughts which will guide you what to do next. And the best thing that can happen to you is the eureka moment, that insight. You may get that also. So this is my summary in today's session to all of you who are watching this, that if you are going through the phase of boredom, don't jump into the conclusion that the first thing you need to do is to get out of that situation, because if you do, you may probably not be able to come back to that situation at all. And also, let us not overhype boredom. Okay, if it is an evil, it is a necessary evil, right? It is ultimately better for you than a lot of other things which you may do that time just to convince yourself that you are not getting bored, right? So boredom definitely is a necessary evil. If you are going through it, if you are experiencing it, then surely something good is going to come out of that passage of time when you are feeling bored. So don't unnecessarily jump into the wrong conclusion, which will take you away from the task at hand completely, and it will never allow you to come back to the task at hand, right? And try it out. And if you ever have a doubt in your mind, just think about what happened with Archimedes. So again, it didn't happen by planning. He didn't think that he will sit in the bathtub and it will come to him. It just came to him. So that's what I'm trying to say. We cannot plan these things. They happen in a certain way, which is natural, and we should accept that it is natural, and we should conduct ourselves accordingly. So I hope that I have been able to convince all of you that do not overreact to the state of boredom. Do not jump into the wrong conclusions when you are going through a passage of time when you are bored. Rather, allow yourself to go through that state, and surely, if you have a task at hand, you will come back to it in some manner or the other. Probably not directly after the state of boredom, maybe indirectly by doing some household chores, or maybe doing some very mundane study related activity which you would not have done because it's already done in the past. But these kind of mundane and monotonous activities are a better alternative to disengaging yourself from the task at hand. So that was my summary for today's session, and thank you all for watching this session. And one more thing, I made a separate YouTube channel for these early morning sessions because I realized that the content is very different from our sessions during the day. Sessions during the day are for the classes, and I thought that maybe if I make a separate YouTube channel, then you may want to share it with some of your friends or relatives. They may want to subscribe to this channel just like you may want to, and therefore I have made a completely separate YouTube channel for this. So whether you may even post your comments, so that is also absolutely fine, and certainly I'll reply. And if there is a topic on which you want me to speak about, then you may post that in the comments as well, and certainly I'll make it a point to address that issue, right? So thanks a lot, and I'll conclude this session. Bye all of you.